some point, people will say, I will not work for you because you're running your company like you did 100 years ago.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast lovers. Is there anything as energizing as meeting young people and listen to what they have to say? In episode 106, I have the pleasure of meeting Emilie Christiansen, legal counsel at DNVGL, and since last week, former president of Young Ship International. We speak about so many interesting topics in this episode. Like, for instance, Emilie is working with the legal side of digitalization, which usually is a step after the technical developments, and something that everyone that I meet is now worrying about and saying, when will the legal side catch up? You can rest assured, after you have listened to Emilie, you will know that there are almost as many experts from the legal side looking into this as from the technical side. I will not keep this conversation from you any longer. The interview was made in Oslo on December the 4th, 2018. This is Emilie Christiansen for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Lena. My name is Emilie Christiansen. I'm here because I'm the chairman of Young Ship Oslo and the president of Young Ship International, but also work in shipping. Was a shipping lawyer in private practice for a number of years in London and Oslo. And now I moved in-house to DNVGL, where I work as an in-house counsel, legal counsel for the company.
So how did you come in contact with shipping?
I actually started working in shipping just after I graduated, really. So at the age of 19, I joined the company Norgas Carriers, or EM Skaugen, sort of a receptionist office assistant. And I really liked shipping already at that point, so I started doing some shipping courses.
Why do you like shipping? I mean, have you been at sea or sailing or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. I think I come from just outside Oslo, down towards the sea. So we've always been out in our boat and have some sort of connection to the ocean or to the sea. So I think that's sort of what sparked the interest. And then when I started working in the industry, I just found it highly interesting. So I started doing some shipping courses on the side. And then when I decided what I wanted to study, I decided I want to become a lawyer and I wanted to move to England to study. I made sure that I could study international law so that I got some sort of shipping in there somehow.
Okay, I see. So you started as a receptionist?
Yeah, I did.
And then what?
So then I moved to London, started studying in London, and after about a year, perhaps, not even a year, I picked up the phone to the 2 Norwegian law firms in London. And I said, hey guys, I used to work in administration in this company in Oslo. Do you have anything for me? Anything I can do in London, I would be happy to assist. And I was very lucky because Wickborein, just about that time or a bit later, expanded their office in London. So they called me back a few months later and said, basically, would you like to come here and work as a office assistant / receptionist here as well? And for me, that was brilliant because I was studying in London, but I was really into sort of keeping the connection to Norway and also the shipping industry. And Wickborein's office in London is essentially a shipping offshore office. That's what they do there.
Yeah. So how long were you there?
In London?
Yeah.
Almost 8 years, so quite a long time. So I stayed with Wickborein for that whole time, so sort of gradually went up. As I completed my bachelor degree, I started working as a paralegal, so a fee earner, where you actually earn money for the company. And then once I finished my LPC, which is sort of, let's call it a master degree, I started working as a trainee solicitor, which is a bit like advokatfullmektig in Norway and Sweden. And then I stayed on for a further 2 years. And then I moved with the company to Oslo. So I started working for the Oslo office of Vikborg.
I see. Still doing
shipping offshore, mainly sort of shipping litigation, international arbitration, and dispute resolution.
Respect.
Lots of fun. Lot of fun, actually.
Okay. And then
about a year ago, I was offered a position in DNVGL as an in-house counsel, and I decided that it would be a good time to try something new, and started there 8th of January this year.
So what do you do there?
It's a huge transition in that now you work as legal counsel for the entire company. So you work with all business areas. DNVGL is, people think of it as sort of a maritime business, which it is very much so and historically, but they also have other business areas like business assurance, doing various assurance and verification work. We have digital solutions, which hold on to all of the sort of digital services, softwares and so forth.
Yeah, I did meet with both.
You met with Björn, I know.
Yeah, and previously, 2 years ago, something like that, I met with Remi.
Yeah, did you? Lovely. It's both of them are really, really interesting and
and he spoke. Remi spoke a lot about the digital side and technical side, since he comes from that.
Exactly. I just took over the sort of responsibility from the group legal side for digital solutions, which is our digital area, which is really where I think focus will be going forward.
Isn't that business area exploding now?
It's certainly exploding.
Not exploding, but exploding.
No, but it's exploding. I think it's also extremely important that it is exploding. And I think the digital transformation in DNVGL is extraordinary. They're really a company that manages to focus on digitalization in the truest form, because they're not only digitalizing their own company, they're also digitalizing their services and what they're actually doing. And I think that that's a trend that's going on more and more now. You see also the law firms, they're not only focusing on how can we make our day-to-day work more digital, but also what services can we offer our clients, which sort of hangs on to the digital journey. And I think the DNVGL has been doing that for a long time. So they are really in the forefront when it comes to the digital journey. And they come up with so many cool and interesting ideas that it's quite cool to be part of, I have to say.
So how do you see the future for shipping when you're in that department?
I think when you're looking at sort of shipping from DNVGL's perspective, then obviously you have the traditional shipping, but you also have much sort of a wider range of shipping, which perhaps goes outside of what the traditional shipping is seen like. So I think shipping as such in DNVGL sense, when it comes to digitalization, there's still a future because they will be involved in the whole journey, whether it's offering new services within the digital sphere or it's helping to make the shipping routes more efficient or everything. They will have something in there for all sort of aspects of shipping. But I have to say personally, I've said this for a number of years and I don't think it's different now, is that until there is an actual substitute for shipping will remain the same. 90% of continental trading is done via ships, and there is no proper substitute yet. So the future for shipping will still be there. It's just a matter of how it's done, and sort of, okay, you might use autonomous ships, you might use more efficient way of doing stuff because you have more data to analyze. But shipping in the truest sense, i.e. a ship on the water transporting goods from A to B or C, will still be there. I think personally.
I agree. But it's always nice to have my guests say what I think.
No, but it's interesting because people are like, I actually read this report, was it last week? And it said that only 7% thought that shipping would remain sort of as it is in, I can't remember, it was 10 or 15 years or something. And I read it and I thought 7%, that's extraordinary, because what do you actually think will take over? I've heard lectures on drones taking over, so drones transporting containers, which is a great idea, in some places, but volume-wise, I just really struggle to see how that could have some volume impact on the shipping market, so to speak.
Yeah, but depending on how that question was put, because I would say, if you say, is the shipping industry going to be the same? I would say, I hope not.
Yeah,
because I would
true.
have thought another way. I would have thought about the culture and how we develop things and how we become more interesting for people outside our own industry.
That's true, though. And I think that is an area where we are making progress. One of the things that I've been not thinking about, but sort of perhaps reflecting about the past 6 months have been how we have moved from, at least in Norway, a maritime focus, shipping focus, to an ocean focus. And, a lot of banks in Norway have changed their departments from perhaps a shipping department to an ocean department. The Norwegian Ship Owners Association have had conferences now, their yearly large conferences on oceans. And I think that sort of shift from thinking in silos, so thinking on shipping, thinking on oil and gas, thinking on fisheries, to actually thinking about the ocean is a massive shift in mindset, so that you can actually apply technologies and ways of working from one silo to another silo. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think that the sort of industry's acceptance, perhaps, that we're in this together. And, whether you're working with fish farming, or whether you're working with an oil tanker, or whether you're actually extracting the oil, you're still using the ocean, and that's one thing, and we all have one common interest, and that is protecting it and utilizing the best way possible. So my sort of hope, I think, is that there will be a better utilization of not only technologies, but knowledge also within that sort of non-siloed environment, I think.
Yeah, and it will also open up, like digitalization, for other skills that we need. I can see that we need them and have needed them for the last 20 years, but there was no place because it was not in fashion, or it was not accepted by the management teams that we needed other skills than the skills that we have used for the last centuries.
That's true, though. And I think that I feel like obviously shipping is still conservative. That's not going to change in the first place. But I do think that there are some ship owners, for example, that do have this increased focus on a change of perhaps skill set and what you need. I think everyone understands and accepts at the moment you get an autonomous ship, you will need IT people sitting on shore that you didn't need previously, where you only had one guy running around fixing printers, perhaps. You need other types of cultural skills. You need other types of perhaps EQ skills, not necessarily IQ.
And maybe the education for master mariners needs to include some kind of IT knowledge.
Well, it should certainly do, and should do that already. Because if you look at how they carry out, for example, it's really cool how they carry out surveys now, sort of where the surveyors actually don't go on board, but they do everything electronically. I saw this at Kongsberg Maritime about a year ago. And that means that the people on the ship needs to have sufficient knowledge to actually carry out, not necessarily the reparations, but to fix the problem by way of assistance over the phone or the internet, and so that they can go into port and actually have a repair or whatever is needed. And that means that there is definitely a larger need for different skills than perhaps what people taught previously.
And having that said, that is also a theory of mine, that then it doesn't really matter what gender that person has.
Certainly not. No. I think I couldn't agree more with that.
Which means that we may see more women in this industry.
Hopefully we will. I think I try to follow follow the discussions on sort of seafarers and what's going on in the industry as far as I can. And I feel I read sort of conflicting reports every day. Some day you read, it's picking up with women are more and more interested in going out on the oceans and becoming seafarers. And then 2 days later, you read that there's a decrease in number of women. So I think it's difficult to really know what the position really is. But there's no reason why it can't be a woman or why it should be a particular person from a particular country.
No, maybe I think it's because there is a lack of seafarers now.
Yeah, that is true though. And I think that in Norway we do, there is a lot of discussion when you flag out vessels, and you do that in order to get, call it non-Norwegian crew, because it's cheaper and they're subject to different regulations or perhaps less stringent regulations. And that might absolutely very well be a factor for why there are less women on the oceans.
Yeah, I agree.
But I think there are more women now, for example, applying to IT studies. And there is certainly a need for people with IT skills. So it remains to be seen whether the actual industry will be quick enough to make our industry interesting for those sort of non-standard skills. Because now they're used to going to, call it law schools and attract people studying law, and they're used to going to the typical business schools and attract those people. But they're not necessarily used to going out to IT people. And I had a very interesting discussion actually with a friend who's in recruiting a couple of weeks ago, and she attended a seminar on recruitment of IT personnel. And she came back and she said, it was amazing. It is so different than all other recruiting I've ever done. And then she discussed it a bit back and forth. And I was sitting there thinking, it is really different than what we're used to traditionally. And it is certainly a mindset change needed from the employers.
I agree. I totally agree. And I mean, the coolest people I have interviewed, can I say that those are women 35?
Yeah.
For instance, in Copenhagen, on blockchain and 3D printing and
so cool.
Remote control vessels and things like that. So just listen to those ladies. And wow.
I presume they're from Maersk, or some of them, because they're large in those areas.
Some of them are not still there, but some of them are.
Yeah, exactly.
but I mean, blockchain. Who knew about that 2 years, 3 years ago?
2 years, probably a few. 3 years ago, not many.
No.
And I think it's very interesting with blockchain, because I think you see, if you look at the shipping company, and it's that with all trends really, or buzzwords. You have the companies that want to be in the forefront, and you have the companies that prefer to be in the back and follow the leader in a sense. And DNVGL obviously does lots in blockchain, and it's legally extraordinarily interesting, but also practically, we have this technology. How are we actually going to use it? And that in ship insurance, for example, marine insurance, there is lots of initiatives going on trying to actually use the technology in the best way possible. And it's yet to be seen how it's actually going to be done. In DNVGL, it's done with certain certificates. And it's great. You can reduce the risk for false certificates, for example, do everything electronically. But there's also a number of areas where the use of blockchain in itself will not necessarily mean that the information is better, because blockchain is basically no better than the information you provide to it.
No.
So you have to sort of be a step ahead, and you have to make sure that whatever you're going to use blockchain for has to be correct. And I think that's where a lot of these initiatives we see now are sort of stalling, and they're not really moving to implementation, because there are different considerations that have to be made.
Yes, definitely. I think it was 2 years ago that I, by accident, met with Deanna MacDonald, and she's now heading up Bloch, BLOC, in Copenhagen, where they want to become a center of excellence for blockchain in maritime, of course, together with Maersk and IBM. And I said to Deanna, could you please give me a crash course? Because I don't know what this is. And she did. So you can listen to that if you want.
I will do.
And then I had the possibility to meet with the man from IBM who is heading the IBM part of Maersk IBM blockchain thing. And Deanna used to work with pharmaceuticals. So that's how she learned that. And he used to work with Europol.
Yeah.
Trying to trace criminal people and so on, and what was going on, financial crimes and things like that. So they bring that knowledge into when they are trying to set up a maritime blockchain and see how that works. And that also goes back to people who have other skills.
And completely different backgrounds.
Yes, definitely.
And that's a sort of perfect example of non-silo thinking, that you're actually going out and finding a technology used in a different industry that you're not part of at all, that could really be applied to what you're doing. And I do think that a number of perhaps sectors in the shipping industry are not good enough at doing that. There are some ship owners who are really, really out there and try to do that, employ people from different backgrounds and have their own sort of hubs of trying to invent new things. But then there are sort of the most part are they're basically sitting there trying to wait for something to fall into their laps.
Yeah, I know. I'm from Gothenburg, and in Gothenburg we got all these autonomous cars. And
do you?
Yeah, Volvo is producing them, and they are actually running in the streets, and there are other things happening in Gothenburg. So I try to keep a close eye on those guys. It's Ericsson with their 5G, and it's all these autonomous cars. And since Volvo Cars is also owned by Geely, it's a lot of Chinese interest. So they say that Lindholmen in Gothenburg in Sweden is actually more brains working on IT than in Silicon Valley. If you look upon how big it is.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, and there are so many good people there talking about AI and all of the buzzwords right now. And I learn so much, and I'm amazed that we don't work more together, because they are ahead of us now. We will probably catch up later on, but there are so many opportunities right now.
There are, though, and I know that if you listen to women or people like Silvija Seres, for example, who is, Silvija Seres, she's a board member of DNVGL, but she's also, she's an amazing woman. She's educated, I believe, in Oxford and somewhere else, and she's a technology guru in a sense. She has lots of podcasts as well. And she's a board member now in lots of different companies in Norway. And she speaks about the 12 Gs, she calls them, the 12 Gutenberg moments, which are basically the 12 buzzwords now that you don't necessarily need to know in detail, but that you need to know sufficiently enough to talk about it and to know what's going on. And that's things like, for example, blockchain, AI, digitalization of health, and various things like that. And if you listen to her speak, you really do get inspired to bring knowledge from other industries into your own, because she's looking at this from a high perspective. The problem is when you go to sort of more industry seminars, you're only focusing again on your own tiny little sector, whether that silo is insurance or whether it is law or whether it's finance. You don't really have these crossovers, which you should probably set up sort of think tanks for companies within the shipping industry.
Let's do that.
That would be really cool.
Next year.
Yeah. No, I just joined something called Catapult Ocean as a mentor, and it's a startup accelerator for startup within ocean technology, essentially. And what they have done, which is really, really cool, is that they have gone out and found lots of mentors. So it could be the CEO of Hurtigruten, or it could be the guy who started Kahoot, or it could be myself, to try to bring this cross-industry knowledge down to these startups who's trying to do something within ocean technology. So I think they're really onto something when it comes to bringing together knowledge from different part of the industry, whether you're working with ships or you're working with an app or you're working as something completely different.
I met with an AI guru last episode, and he was the digital transformer for Stena Line, and he has now left. So I interviewed him about what he thought and how he did that and so on. And he said that when I asked him how was it to enter the maritime industry, because he came from outside.
What's his name again?
Amr Mohammed.
Yeah, I think I've heard him speak. Yeah.
He said, I don't care what industry it is. I just want to fix the problem. And all the programmers that I have hired, they don't care that it's a boat or a ship. They just want to solve that problem. And that's interesting. And probably sort of like putting a knife in the heart of the people in the shipping industry.
Yeah, it is sort of, because we're saying, and I think that's actually an interesting thing, because the thing which I think is most special about our industry is that most people working in it have some sort of strong connection to shipping or the ocean. You know, for us, it matters whether you work with a ship or whether you work with a car, because we have a strong connection to the ocean and we don't have that connection to the car. So for us, it's very odd when someone comes and say, you know, I don't give anything about whether it's a ship or whether it's a car. I just want to fix the problem. But perhaps that's where the sort of leaders of the industry needs to just accept that that's the way it is and go out and find these guys who don't really care whether it's a ship or whether it's a car and hire them to try to fix our problem.
Some people do, but mostly don't. And I think, I mean, if you think back, it's a traditional industry. Yeah, it used to be people sailing on a ship, and one went ashore and started a company owning a ship, bought his
family owned.
Yeah. And then he employed the people he had been sailing with because he knew he could trust them. And he was probably the master mariner on that ship. So sort of the hierarchy continued, and he felt safe with the people that was working for him. In the old days, we're talking now. But still, family-owned business, to tell them that what you are doing it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's not that important.
No. You can't do that.
No,
you can, but they will probably not accept it.
But it's you know, it's very different. You know, if you only work in, let's say you do finance, and you don't really care whether you finance a building or you finance a ship or you finance a company. Also, I think if you do shipping finance, most people are then looking at doing shipping finance. They care about doing shipping finance. That's their interest, and that's what they want to do their job. So I do think it's very much a mind sort of shift. I think for me, I love this industry. That's why I don't want to go to another industry.
So do I. I think maybe Amr didn't. He spent 2 years in our industry, so maybe he didn't get a bug.
Yeah. Maybe he just didn't like the ships. He didn't think the ships were cool enough. No, but I think isn't what you need then a combination of the two?
Yeah,
you need the people who really, you know, they have the heart for this industry, and then you need some people who come with completely clear mind and don't have any sort of particular interest in the industry, and then you need to combine them and get the best possible result. Potentially combined with a think tank of major industry players trying to utilize the technologies we have in various sectors.
Yeah, you need to listen to that episode with him. He's also talking about the turntables that they have, you know, reverse leadership. So everyone in the management team had a digital mentor, a young digital mentor.
I've heard that actually. That is really cool. So they're doing something right, that's for sure.
Yeah, they are. So when did you become a member of Young Ship?
Young Ship. I became a member of Young Ship whilst I was still in London. So it must have been 2014, perhaps 13. But there is no Young Ship in London.
Oh, I see. Why not?
That's a very long discussion.
Okay.
So what happened was that I wanted to attend Young Ship events while I was in Oslo because I went here privately and with work. So I signed up and I was so annoyed that there was no Young Ship in London. So
maybe we need to start to say, what is Young Ship?
Yeah, we should say that. Young Ship is an organization for young people in the shipping industry, or in the maritime industry, I would say, because it's much more than shipping only. And we work with enhancing knowledge and sort of trying to bridge the knowledge gap between what we call the younger generation and the more established generation. And it's really all about giving young people to a certain degree a voice and giving them an arena to learn and to network with peers, which I myself think is extraordinarily important, and also to meet industry leaders and develop whether it's their skill set or their knowledge.
And also to have a network if you move somewhere.
Exactly. And if you go traveling, like if you go to Singapore with work, then you have Young Ship in Singapore and you can write to them and join their events. And you meet people from, if you're in this game for a long time, you meet people from all over the world who ends up becoming your friends. So I obviously think it's a great organization.
Yeah. So how did you become the president?
Well, it sort of went a bit hand in hand in that I moved back from London and my first goal was to become a part of the board of Young Ship Oslo. So I applied and I've been part of something called Association for Students Abroad, which is a large Norwegian organization for students in the board of the United Kingdom. So I think that's where I got the position in the Young Ship Oslo board. And then a year after, I applied to become the chairman of Oslo. And as part of that round, then the board of Young Ship International wanted me to take over as the president of Young Ship International as well. So now I've been doing that been in the board of Oslo for 3 years, and the chairman is 2 years, and the president of Young Ship International 2 years.
And what do you do?
What do I do? I think as part of Young Ship Oslo, it's lots of organizing events, managing to get good and interesting speakers, ensuring that you have partner agreements with the companies you want to partner up with. And now the major thing we're working with is Young at Nordshipping. We're part of the official Nordshipping program, so that obviously requires sort of 4 days of planning. You're planning 4 separate days with hopefully panels of really interesting people. And I think in Oslo, we're actually really, really lucky and that most industry leaders actually want to come and speak to us. We had an event 2 weeks ago called Mentorship, where we got the leaders from Grieg Green, a VP from Equinor, and Nina Jensen from Rare Ocean, the common mentor, our members. So essentially people, they come. If they can make it time-wise, they come, which is absolutely amazing. I still don't think we have had sort of any negative response from anyone saying that they don't want to do it. If people can't make it, it's simply because of time. So we are extraordinarily lucky, I would say, in that sense. So that's Young Ship Oslo mostly, and Young Ship International, it's more strategy work, how do we want to develop the organization? Where do we want to be? We get applications from all over the world. Right now, as per today, we're 24 branches in 19 countries and over 4,000 members. And there is quite a lot of strategy work. Do you want to grow fast? Do you want to grow slowly? Do you want to retain control in Norway? Do you want to open for more sort of global ownership of the organization? So I think during my past 2 years, what we have done is to grow in what I'd like to think of as a healthy way. So, we're saying yes to new departments where we really think that there is a good and solid base for actually starting something. You're not relying on like 1 or 2 people who are very keen and eager to do something. And we have also opened up for a more of a global ownership of Young Ship as a brand. So the board of Young Ship International now consists of the chairman of the Norwegian branches, plus the chairman of Young Ship Cyprus, and the chairman of Young Ship Helsinki. So that's sort of what I want to do was to start a gradual transition to making Young Ship even more global and worldwide, even though it is, but to make all of the organizations or departments outside of Norway feel like they are really a part of running this organization as well.
And how is it equally men and women, or?
In the board, it's more women than men. Yeah. Both in Oslo and international.
And members, do you know?
Members, I actually don't know how we're placed in members. And particularly now with the GDPR coming in, we're very much sort of focused on having less control of our members' personal data. But I sort of, my thinking is that we're at least sort of 50-50. That's most of our events is 50-50.
Because that's interesting, I think. I'm a member of Vista International. I work for Vista International partly, and I mean, Vista has been here for 45 years next year.
That's impressive. I'm a member of Vista Norway, so
yeah, it is. But on the other hand, how far have we reached in 45 years?
I think Youngship is different in that Youngship contains the young people. And I think it's quite clear that in almost all companies in the shipping industry, there are the people going in, the difference is not that large in terms of men and women. Where you see the problem is higher up in the hierarchy. So let's say past the age of 35, which tend to be the age limit in Youngship. That's where you see a sort of real gap in the genders and how much I think there is. Well, it's difficult. I had this discussion as a Vista event actually 2 weeks ago here in Oslo. And now I work in a company which is, I would say, very balanced in terms of men and women, but that is probably one of the few which has that balance. You know, there is a very equal number of men and women in leadership positions. Was I think in almost every other company within our sector, that's not the case. So whether sort of what Vista have achieved, I think we have achieved putting it on the agenda. And that's certainly something.
I think so too.
And I think that we're in Youngship, we're focusing a lot on that as well. I think we're focusing on diversity much more than just men and women, but also when it comes to background, skill sets, religion, sex, whatever. You know, diversity is so much more, I think, than just your gender. And we actually took that into our bylaws last year to ensure that that's one of the things that we stand for as an organization. And we're trying to focus on that in different ways, I would say. We have, I wrote an article or a letter in respect of the Me Too scandal, which was published in Splash 247. So that was something. And we're doing sort of events trying to focusing on things like negotiation skills, negotiating your salary, for example. Because we know based on a survey we did 2 years ago that in the industry, after, I can't remember whether it was 3 or 4 years, then the salary for men and women starts to differentiate. And that's still the position. So we think that what we can do as an organization is at least to try to give both men and women skill-based learning to, you know, go in and actually negotiate, because that's what you need to do in order to try to keep up with the people with higher salaries. But we're certainly nowhere close to, you know, reaching an equal balance of men and women in leadership positions.
No, definitely not.
And I think no matter who you would discuss with, they have different opinions, perhaps as to why that is and what could be done to change it, and so far. And I think it's not a simple solution.
Especially not when you're on a global arena.
Exactly. It's cultural, it's historical, it's also based on what people want. You know, do you want to be the leader? Do you want to work X amount of hours? You know, people are different. But I think that it's certainly, the focus has increased at least.
Yeah, I agree. And we're working hard to
continue it.
Continue it.
Well, you had over 300 participants at the conference in Tromsø, so it shows
from
that
34 countries.
I know it's so. I'm so envious. I really wanted to be there, but I couldn't go.
Yeah, it was really a success.
And you also have taken on your first male member, Vista Norway at least.
We did a counting. I can't really remember how many. I think it was 7 countries within Vista organization that has male members as well. And I have met several of the Vista USA male members. So, yeah, I think we need to find the men who want the change as much as we want to change. And then work together.
And there's no reason why men wouldn't want that.
No.
The same as women want.
No.
Because I think if you read every type of survey out there, it will tell you that businesses run better with more women in leadership positions. But on this point, I think what's great about the young people is that we know that obviously we're the future. The future lies with us. And I think that this is where we actually can make a difference. And I also think if you look at what young people or Generation X or Millenials are interested in now, we know that they are much more interested in, for example, diversity, social responsibility, running the ethical business. I read the Deloitte survey, which said that I think it was 85 of young people or Millennials are willing to take a pay cut to ensure they work for an ethical company or a company with like good CSR. So I think it shows that young people will make a difference, because at some point people will say, I will not work for you because you're running your company like you did 100 years ago. And that's no longer possible. And at least if we go back to the previous discussion, if you want to try to attract skills from other sectors or other industries, then we certainly have to start thinking a bit more outside of the box.
Definitely. I attended a seminar with the communications bureau a couple of weeks ago, and I listened to a communications manager at Volvo. They work with diversity and they work with social responsibility and everything on their recruitment site. And then we had a look at the big 5, like it was Coca-Cola, Google, Apple, Samsung, and Spotify, I think. On their recruitment site, all you can see is about what you were talking about, because they're targeting the millennials. Where do we see that in our industry?
No, we don't actually. And I think that's why I feel at least we have some responsibility as Youngship to sort of show that we're here and this is what we're interested in. And I know that in some cities like Oslo, we know that people are willing to listen to us to a certain degree. Whilst in other countries, I know they're struggling a lot more to have a voice that is actually listened to in a sense. But it's certainly a backlog in companies actually realizing that it's so important for young people. And I notice it myself. For me to have a connection with where I work, to care about the brand, to care about the values, is extraordinarily important, because you want to, it sounds cheesy, but you want it to feel meaningful, and you want to have a reason to be up in the morning, as they say in some of these job adverts. But I think there's some truth to that. I think young people really do have a much higher degree of sense of belonging and sense of responsibility. It's not only about going out and earning money. It's about actually doing something positive towards the world as well.
I'm happy to hear you say that. How could the maritime industry become more visible?
That's a good question, actually. I think it's a difference becoming more visible in Norway versus becoming more visible globally. That's two very different things, I believe. If you're talking about global visibility, I think the problem is that what people see of the maritime industry tend to be the sort of bureaucratics like IMO and those sort of old institutions. They do great things, but I think what would perhaps make us more visible is to continue the work that we do, perhaps in Youngship and Vista, but also perhaps making other cross-national collaborations. Perhaps the think tank we were talking about could go across countries. So you could have leaders from Volvo, other types of companies and shipping companies and other types of firms in the same think tank to try to make both our industry more visible, but also try to get the knowledge. And I think even within the maritime industry, there are silos. And that's so fascinating. I had a call with something called a Nautical Institute a couple of weeks ago. And I found it extraordinary because I myself, they're based in England, and I had never heard of them. And I just thought that is so odd because, I feel I read most stuff which is out. I think I have a relatively good overview, but this one organization had just sort of at least not come across my my reading list. So it's a very good question. There are some newspapers out there sort of trying to bring the information together. I don't know really what would be the best thing to try to make the industry more visible. What do you think?
I think your initiative to appoint 10 women to watch for the future in the maritime industry.
Initiative. Yeah,
that's a good initiative.
Yeah.
Another good initiative was to interview them.
We're doing that again this year.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
I have to come back.
Yeah, exactly. So part of Young at North Shipping 2019 will be the 10 Women to Watch list, again with Capital. So that's, I think I was running it last time, and it's just such a brilliant thing to do. And, Capital and newspapers are interested in it, and it's perfect for branding for the companies who have employees who's on the list. And it's just fascinating that sort of it's not done before, really.
I agree. And I have had the pleasure to meet all women.
Of them. Exactly.
I have met all of them, but I haven't interviewed all of them because timing and so on. And they feel so good about it.
Yeah.
Just to make someone else feel so good about it.
Yeah, and to be recognized for what you're doing, in a sense. These women, it was so hard because we had a long list of women, and we had a very complicated sort of voting system for the jury to make sure that the scores were differentiated enough that we could actually manage to get to a list of 10. And they are just all doing so much cool, well, first of all, cool stuff. These are really, really driven, cool women who no doubt will be, who some of them are already in really sort of high positions, but they are no doubt the women to watch for the future. So for us, the sort of a younger generation, to be able to give that appreciation to them was just amazing, I think.
They are also grateful. And I have met them afterwards, after we released the podcasts, and they are all, they are grateful to me now as well.
Exactly.
Because more than their family and more than their friends and more than their boss now know how good they are.
Yeah, and what they're doing. But perhaps that's an idea, though, to try to take this award to other countries.
Yeah, you could do it through Young Ship.
Exactly. We could use Young Ship to try to make a similar type of award in different countries. We try to make the award in Norway non-Norwegian, but it's difficult to, when you're in Norway, it's quite natural that a high number of the women on the list will be Norwegian. But it is certainly a focus on trying to include people there who are not...
Yeah, but also, in Norway, you would know about the Norwegian women.
That's the problem. So
in England, you would know about the British women, and then you can vote more accurate.
Exactly, that makes sense, actually, because what we tried to do last time was to get in nominations. But of course, we already had lots of women sort of in mind together with the jury, and then we got nominations. But of course, we don't have a full overview of all great women in shipping in Cyprus or all brilliant women in shipping in Brazil. But that's a good idea, actually. Perhaps something for the next board meeting in Young Ship International.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? I think from our perspective, what was the coolest perhaps was how much the women who who were listed actually appreciated it. Because, as Young Ship, and a number of these women are they're already in really cool positions and stuff, that they actually they all came, and they loved it and they appreciated it. And, I've been speaking to quite a few of them afterwards and they're like, thank you so much. It was such a great award. And I think we really didn't know that it would be that well received.
Yeah, the energy in that room was amazing.
Good. Yeah.
It was so much fun.
It was really good. So I'm sure it will be equally good. It's of course Marte who's running it this year. So I'm sure it will go brilliantly this year as well.
Yeah, and it also goes to, when they are exposed to a wider audience, they become role models.
Yeah, they do, certainly.
And that is good, because where do you see, in the maritime industry, where do you see women being interviewed if you are not CEO of a big company?
You see the CEOs, that's what you see. You don't see the sort of younger people. Then you have to either be part of Youngship or part of Vista to basically get the chance to meet someone who could be your role model or be part of a sort of mentoring program or something like that. And that takes quite a lot of personal motivation, you know, to actually find an organization, sign up, go and be part of it. You don't see them never in magazines like Capital.
No, but also in the maritime press.
No, never in the maritime press.
It's the same people that are interviewed in the maritime press.
Yeah, every single time. Yeah. It's absolutely
so
true.
I wonder if they have something new to say.
They're saying the same. Yeah, that's true. But perhaps what the press should do then is to try to run an edition where they, instead of interviewing the leaders, interview like 2 steps down.
Yeah, and maybe they could interview some women other days than the 8th of March.
Yeah, that's also a very good point. Yeah, they certainly should do. Well, in my mind, I'm this type of person who's like, how can it matter? Like, it should be absolutely oblivious whether it's a man or a woman. There's no reason why it should be a man more than a woman. It's just extraordinary. But it is certainly how it is.
Did you have a role model growing up?
Oh, good question. I don't really think so. But I think I'm the type of person who sort of always have role models in that I see what people do and that I think that's cool. I want to do the same. But I don't think it's like one person who's sort of been my role model. Of course, except for my mother, because I love my mother and she's done a great job. But sort of work-wise, I think I sort of found my own little route. And then I've always used my bosses to the extent possible. I had a great female boss in Vikborg in London who taught me everything I know. So I used her a lot for inspiration. And then other people you see. But of course, it tends to be women that you look up to for me.
Yeah. There were no women when I entered the industry.
No, exactly.
So I didn't have any female role model
to look up to.
No. So we have a responsibility. My generation have a responsibility, I think.
Of being visible then?
Yes.
And being approachable?
Yes. You wouldn't imagine how many emails I get from young people.
Do you?
Yeah. They listen to my podcast.
I met people listening to your podcast from Belgium, from the Netherlands. Where is it? From France? And I think even one from Italy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's downloaded in 165 countries. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's amazing. I never expected that. But also I get emails from maritime teachers and they recommend their students to listen to this podcast because I meet interesting people. Yeah,
and role models, as you say.
Yeah.
It's difficult to find them.
Yeah.
And to contact them. Some people do that. Some people will write you on LinkedIn. But for a lot of people, that sort of step to doing that is quite high. So you need to be quite visible in order for people to feel that it's okay to approach you, in a sense. And this is a tip, and I discussed it with my friends. We have this group of friends from back home. We're 22 girls. And I discussed it with some of them about a half year ago, that we are not good enough at sort of giving each other, making each other feel better and approaching each other and say, well done, this is great. Or say, hey, I need help. I'm going for the interview. Please, could you help me? Because there's so many other good women out there. And we started doing it now. So I was in the new Norwegian newspaper Finansavisen the other day together with my legal team. And one of my friends sent a copy of it and said, look, that's brilliant. And everyone said, well done. And we need to be better at doing stuff like that. So we really are there for each other. I think that's quite important. And it probably goes for men as well. But I can only say sort of my experience from my friends. But it's quite important to use the resources that you have.
I agree. Totally agree.
Mm.
Who do you think I should interview the next? Who would you be interested in listening to?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Have you had many politicians?
No.
In interviews?
No.
I think it would be really cool to interview a politician who's not sort of in the top, who's a bit below, and who's free to sort of speak their mind, so to speak. So someone within one of the sort of larger parties, either in Norway or in Sweden, but focusing on the maritime industry, where they can actually say something. I think that would be cool. Who else? Have you interviewed Maren from Catapult Ocean?
No.
No, she's really interesting to listen to. I would. She's the reason why I emailed and asked whether I could become part of their program, because what they're doing is just really, really, really cool for startups. And I think
she spoke in Tromsø.
Yeah, did she?
I listened to
her. So you
her
have
there.
heard her. Yeah.
She was really good.
Exactly. So I think she's definitely sort of high up on my list of people I want to hear.
Okay. I will have to see what I can do then.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Emilie, for taking the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Emilie. I think that was a nice chat. We managed to cover a lot of important stuff. For instance, when you brought up the question of where and how the maritime industry is trying to attract the young people, are we doing that in their courtyard, or are we doing it in ours? We all have a mutual responsibility to try and raise the profile and show the exciting and new stuff that this industry has to offer. And we must do it in a modern way. Let's get rid of all the old symbols that we ourselves are associating with the maritime industry and see what new things we can find. In another context, the other day, someone tried to image Google the word seafarer to see what turned up. And it was mostly elderly men with tattoos, looking into monoculars or binoculars and steering wheels and anchors. I know that anchors and binoculars are still used, but there are so many other things that we could incorporate in our brand as a maritime industry. And the Google search. It was all men that turned up in that Google search. I know that seafarers are usually men. But today, when it's the International Women's Day, maybe we could stop for a moment and remind ourselves that there are also female seafarers. I know it's my soapbox, the invisible woman in the invisible industry. But I think I have to carry that torch since no one else really is doing it. Last week, I made a count of how many female guests I have had on this podcast since I started. And it turned out that with this 106th episode, I have featured 48 women, which is approximately 45%. And then we must consider that I haven't had many of the women usually interviewed in the maritime press as guests yet. What does that say about the maritime press? Well, I think that they are interviewing the same people over and over again. And since most CEOs are men, it's mostly men who are visible in the maritime press. But what is the responsibility from the press itself? Don't they have any goals to feature more women? I think we need some sort of indicator on if and how the needle is moving when it comes to gender diversity in the maritime industry. It's so important with role models, and for young people to be able to see them. And where do you see them? It's either in your company, at conferences, or in the press. I think I leave the conferences and the companies out of this. I think that maybe the development of more podcasts can have an impact on conferences in the future. But I think we can start measuring how many females that are interviewed, featured, and made visible in the maritime press. So we would be able to see if there is a change going on. We could use that cool Bechdel test. I don't know if you heard about it, but I will put a link in the show notes if you want to find out more. It's a measurement that started in 1985, which measures the representation of women in fiction movie. It asks whether a movie features at least 2 women who talk to each other, and they talk about something else than a man. It's something for a researcher to start digging in when it comes to our industry. A measurement like the Bechdel test. Okay, I must come down from my soapbox. I have things to do. It's International Women's Day, and there are so many things to celebrate. My next episode is on autonomous shipping, where I met yet another exciting woman in Oslo. You don't want to miss that. And if you think you have received some value of this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would consider becoming a patron to the Shipping Podcast. You can do that at patreon.com/shippingpodcast. That's all for today. From me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.